It is currently 11:15 p.m. and I was working on an assignment because this is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night, and I am a failing senior and there's a reason why I'm failing. So I wanted to show you guys today what one of my assignments looks like, and you'll notice that I have a lot of notes and a lot of planning, and yet I can't write the actual assignment itself. So I decided to show you what a failing senior doing schoolwork looks like. So I can get a little crazy. I like to share my thoughts. I like to type my thoughts down as I'm having them, just because it helps me get them out and I don't ruminate over them. They're a bit crucial to my process given the environment that I'm in. I was working on this earlier, so there were less distractions. So these were the concepts that I was considering focusing on. Self-education. So while he was in prison, he taught himself to read and write, and for the first time seeing the whitewash of history and the ignorance of fellow uneducated/average human beings with less privilege. And I say human beings because I don't really like saying men, that kind of excludes an entire female population. So self-betterment, losing everything. This is something related to me that I included because this is very relevant to what I'm doing right now. This is where I am typing out my thought process. What made Malcolm X, someone with such a disadvantageous foundation in childhood/adulthood, a major success? Now, this is an important question to me because even though Malcolm X and I had very different hurdles and also very different goals in life, this concept of having disadvantages and making a major success out of those disadvantages, that's something that I want to consider for myself. How did he, the supposedly least likely person to succeed, garner such a following and put the social politics of an entire country under fire of reformation? And this is, again, my internal thoughts. Structure is my kryptonite. This is just a thought I had. A shame Malcolm X wasn't around for social media. If only I had an intensive archive of his everyday dealings, I'd have an easier time seeing him as a person and not a figurehead of history. Now, I think you can see why that would be a hurdle. Makes things even more difficult. Ethical? No. And this is where I diverge. Lack of privacy could arguably confirm a person's simplicity, and unless a follower of Diogenes and the like, such would bring a great embarrassment. Humans need to be important, bigger than they are, and I'm also guilty of this. I try not to be. I try to lessen the ego, but I still do have one. This is Malcolm as well, in who he is as a persona over the he who ponders over breakfast. Malcolm has passed away. This was an afterthought. Malcolm has passed away, but in my perception, I feel he's very much alive regardless of physicality. An enzyme. I call him an enzyme. And that, as an activist, Malcolm X had changed society, and still continues to change society, and lives on as an enzyme. That's unrelated, completely different group of concepts. I have a horrible focus, as you can see. And the likes, so this is an afternote after I say and the likes here after Diogenes, which was a philosopher and extremely hilarious to me, and probably the reason why he's one of my favorite philosophers, not just because of his behavior and just how brilliant he was and yet so out there, but yeah, so that's why I remember him. And I go to mention transcendentalism, so you think Ralph Waldo Emerson I prefer over Henry David Thoreau, even though Thoreau was inspired by Emerson. I enjoyed Emerson's essay Nature more than Henry David Thoreau, what he had to say, even though he wrote Civil Disobedience, which is also very relevant to what's going on right now. His last words were Moose Indian, and I remember that, and I think it's so funny, because that just describes just how much he didn't make sense, in my opinion, because a lot of his writing doesn't make sense to me, and I understand that it's a different time period, but I was able to understand Ralph Waldo Emerson just fine, that I am something eyeball, I am a transparent eyeball, and Ralph Waldo Emerson used strange sayings like that, but regardless, I can read all sorts of strange texts, but for the first time in a long time, I had a very hard time trying to understand what Henry David Thoreau was trying to say. I'm getting sidetracked, as I do. That's basically the premise of my entire YouTube channel. I get sidetracked a lot. Based on the idea that in order to understand the nature of reality, one must first examine and analyze the reasoning process which governs the nature of experience. Stoicism. I go to talk about Stoicism, which, I could go on and on about, but let's not here. Let me just get through this. I know Malcolm. Malcolm X. I don't know if just saying Malcolm is disrespectful. I do hope not. You, Malcolm X, are a part of what I've come to idolize, at least your actions and accomplishments, if not your person. I know the childhood of Malcolm like the back of my hand, is my childhood. I could have put a slash here. I should have. Thus, that is the Malcolm I understand most, and I am only a child myself. So I have not gotten as far along in life as a man who's already lived his. So it might make sense that I understand child Malcolm the most, but aside from that, his experiences and mine have been so very, very similar, even if slightly different. So I like to study words sometimes. I sometimes study words, and I was thinking, if I want to make this sound professional, why don't I just put down some of my favorite words that might be applicable here? So words I like which are possibly applicable in writing this essay for my own dictionary studies, because Malcolm, too, studied dictionaries. That's how he learned to write in prison. And he was also a part of a debate team, and in prison, people who were literate were like celebrities. Those who had a bunch of knowledge, they were basically prison celebrities, and Malcolm was inspired by them. So, aberration. deviation from the proper/expected course. This is very much related to myself, really, especially because I might not be going to college. Probably won't be going to college because I'm a failure. I'm failing at school. And this is why I'm failing at school, because I'm having such a hard time writing this assignment. So other words for this that could be used, in case I don't want to use this again, is oddity, distortion, departure, peculiarity, deviation, divergence, irregularity, and straying. So I'd like to do that. I'd like to give myself multiple options, just because I don't like to repeat myself. I get mad if I have to repeat my vocabulary while writing. Acumen. Now understand, I have only ever read this word, so I don't actually know how that's pronounced. Acumen? Acumen? I am unsure. So I have simpler words over here, and these are a little more fancy words. So depending on how I'm feeling and where I'm writing, I will switch between these two, and I give myself options. Adroit. That sounds like Android, and I enjoy that. That's why it stands out to me. It's just because I enjoy how that looks/sounds. So quick, skillful, adept in action or thought. And I can only come up with deft off the top of my head. Like deft. Able. I should have put easier words instead of just that one, but sometimes my brain does not work as I wish it to. And this is another one I've never said out loud before. I've only ever wrote it down because I like doing that sometimes. So erudition. Did I do that right? I think I did. Learned, or learned, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Having vast knowledge, lack of erudition in the common American, and that's true for even today. That's just a note of mine. I just have to write 2 simple pages, and it's basically a summary. So why did he believe what he believed, and why? That was all I had to do, and it's just simple, stop overthinking. And this is just a quote I pulled from the biography. Or not just a quote, but it's just an excerpt. So I have often reflected upon the new vistas that reading opened to me. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long-dormant craving to be mentally alive. I certainly wasn't seeking any degree. That sounds a lot like a certain someone. The way a college confers a status symbol upon its students. That sounds very relevant for some reason. My homemade education gave me, with every additional book that I read, a little more sensitivity to the deafness, dumbness, and blindness that was affecting the black race in America. Not long ago, an English writer telephoned me from London asking questions. One was, "What's your alma mater?" I told him books. I say that's the same for myself. I was trying to read today, but my attention span is horrible. My uncle got me this new book, which I hope to possibly cover on the channel sometime later, and it is Be Mindful and Stress Less, 50 Ways to Deal with Your Crazy Life. And I find that very funny that he would get me that, considering. So you will never catch me with a free 15 minutes in which I am not studying something I feel might be able to help the black man, and this sort of conviction as well. It is something that I really aspire to have, because I like learning random things, but when it comes to learning, I have classes that I don't like at all, and when I have classes that I don't like at all, my attention span goes from 100, like hyper-focusing, to 0. And that is an issue for me, because if I really enjoy it, it's like, oh, I need to learn more about this, I can't stop, and when I don't, it's just a giant problem for me. As you can imagine, especially in prison, where there was a heavy emphasis on rehabilitation, an inmate was smiled upon if he demonstrated an unusually intense interest in books. There was a sizable number of well-read inmates, especially the poor, especially the popular debaters. Forgive me, this is a little small. Some were said by many to be practically walking encyclopedias. That is pretty cool. I know it's a different time. Also, just want to draw your attention to this right here. Speaking of time, it's 12:21 a.m. and it is January 11, 2021. What a wonderful number. I really like number patterns. I sometimes screenshot them on my phone. I have a bunch of them. They take up so much space when I see like cool palindrome numbers and stuff. Wow, patterns! That's so cool, so fun. They were almost celebrities, so I mentioned that earlier. No university would ask any student to devour literature as I did when this new world opened to me, of being able to read and understand. Now, it's not here, but he does talk about, I remember this from the book. He does talk about, for the first time, how he sees the whitewashing of history. And he talks about how the perspective of those other than the white man has been erased and warped. And that was something that I wanted to mention in my essay, but then I stopped making these notes because I realized that I don't have to write an essay. I just have to write 2 pages, basically a 2-page summary, and this makes me sad, even though I wouldn't have been able to write the essay anyways, because, again, I sit here and I stress over, what am I gonna use as an introduction? I hate writing the first line. I hate introducing, because it's so stale. I do not like using the common introductions, like, Malcolm X was. I don't like that. I really don't like that. It's so not interesting to me, and I am a person who fixates on interesting and melodious and beautiful. And if my thoughts don't come off as melodious and they're just horribly stale, poor corporate, then I almost feel like there's no point to writing. It's just sad to me. Also, that's another cool little number pattern. And then in 11 minutes when it's 1, 2, 3, 4, that'll be cool. Again, I get distracted. I didn't know that I get distracted.